Hello, my name is Tobias Arnhold. Thanks for staying until the very end towards the last presentation for today. My presentation will be about the question, what is standard APEX? And before I go into this topic, I will just introduce myself. I'm from Germany. I'm a freelancer since 2010. And yeah, doing mostly Oracle stuff, actually like for 100%. And in this Oracle world, I specialized into the Oracle APEX thema, into Oracle APEX, and I'm doing some BI. I'm having a blog called APEX at Work, which is quite known in the community. Maybe you have heard of it. Where on this blog I post different solutions, guidelines, tips, how to work in APEX, how to solve problems. Yeah, and if you have any questions, just ask right away. Okay, let's go on. What is standard APEX? What I can give you is more or less a few tips and guidelines of my experience, and I have worked for several companies. I've worked with a lot of developers, and that's most important, I've worked with a lot of end users. In over 100 projects in the last 10 years. So when I talk about standard, I first have to clarify what I'm aiming for. So what's important when I do an APEX project? So most important, I have to build what the end user needs. Otherwise, I fail. And in the optimal way, I do it in time and in budget. Then they are mostly satisfied with me. On top of this, when I extend this application, it is really good if it's maintainable, if it's easy to extend. I always focus on the standard APEX features, so I prefer them first. And the application at the end should look modern, and a modern UI. So I always stick to the latest UI design I can grab. Okay, let's go on. So this is what it is. My guidelines to hit these targets, and I will bring up a few examples and tips how to reach that, and what all can happen also from a bad side in an APEX consultant life. So, all my projects, which I normally do, 95% of them are made in an agile way. So actually APEX is made to be, APEX projects are made to be done in an agile way. And what does it actually mean? I do not follow some special rules, some Scrum Masters or whatever. I follow this line. I go towards the end user. I mean, you have, when you do a project, you normally have a project manager, you have this customer boss and his end users, and you have to do with all of them. But I stick to those who has to live with the software I developed. Yeah, and I try to build up a team with them, because this is most important and is right for the success of the application. If the end user sees this APEX project as his baby, what comes out, then you're on the right side. Some things you maybe shouldn't do from different perspectives, and from a project manager perspective, you should not let the project manager do the communication with the end user, with your customer. And you should not let the boss, the customer boss, be your first man to talk to, or some other guy who thinks he knows it all. And what is also really important, you should not believe that they actually know their business. Because when you go an agile way, you expect that the guy in front of you knows what they are talking about. And I assure you, when they when you do a project which goes over several departments in a company, then no one knows the correct process. So you have to talk to every end user in every department to see the whole picture. And do not trust them if they just say they know, especially when you are doing it over several departments. Okay. Yeah.
How often do you get a customer that won't let you talk to the end user?
I had one this year, and I stopped the project with him because he said in the first meeting, yeah, I am the end user, you know? Yeah, but you are the project manager. No, I know everything what the end user knows. And it was a project going over the several departments. So I made a prototype over 20 days. It works out great. But then I stopped it because it makes no sense. The customer doesn't get what he needs. And after 3 months later, they didn't went more forward. They somehow thought, this few solution, because it is about performance, is maybe not the best idea. We need to do something with PL/SQL packages. And yeah, so they redeveloped all what I had did. And after 3 months, they had nothing more than before. So yeah, that is what happens. I mean, but it doesn't happen so often, I must say. This is really seldom, but you should look out for it. But I also have a different, I mean, there are project managers which are really smart. But from my experience, it's maybe 1 out of 5, which can actually handle this and can transform the information the right way so that you can build up something in the way the end user wants it. It's not more than 1 of 5. It is as it is. APEX, besides the agile way, APEX is now promoted in this low-code keyword. And actually it is the right word. APEX is low-code. And low-code means something between no coding, where you configure everything, or you do it all by yourself. And with APEX, you have the power to do like small applications with almost no coding, but you can also do really complex application with a lot of coding. And it's on you to decide to go the right way. So there are 3 basic rules I actually follow. Inside APEX, use APEX means use the standard APEX features and then not reinvent the wheel. I often see when people start, and I saw myself in that you build up a master detail page and the select and insert statement you build up yourself because you do not trust the standard APEX process, which is actually doing this stuff for you, including some security features and so on and so on. But when you start with APEX, you don't trust it, so you do it yourself, which is probably not such a good idea. Besides the master detail pages, the interactive grid, the chat charts for dashboarding, and the universal theme for UI, for a modern UI design, is something I prefer. I do when I do new projects. Another big point in APEX, where to put the business code. The business code should always be inside the database. So always think like database first and not putting it into the APEX application, which is often easier and it is faster, but it hits you later, especially when it becomes maintainable. Yeah, so put your code into packages and or views. And when you solve a problem with APEX, think like this. Can I do it with SQL? Then do it with SQL. Can I do it with PL/SQL? Do it with PL/SQL. Otherwise CSS, and at the end, use JavaScript. Most of the APEX developers until now coming from an Oracle perspective or from Oracle Forms, but it changes. There are new guys from the universities coming into APEX, and they often prefer the JavaScript way instead of going via SQL or PL/SQL to solve some business issue. Okay, let's go on. How to start building an application. When you go the agile way, don't start coding, start talking first. You need to understand what the customer needs, and just a tip from my experience, when you start up the first talk, ask him if someone else, another team, another developer, tried to solve this particular business problem before. And if the answer is yes, more than twice, then you should do like this. Leave the room and never come back. Because you can maybe solve it with Apex, but it will cause you also, like the ones before, a lot of trouble. And that's the trouble you basically don't want to have in your daily life. So we don't have this scenario. We have a normal project, but you talk to them and you have the feeling that you didn't understood everything. There are some hidden secrets you have to find out before you really start developing an application. So start with a prototype. Talk to the customer, to the end user. We build up some prototype which we can throw away because I'm not sure if what you told me is really what we need here. And it has the advantage in case you actually cannot solve it with Apex, which almost never happens. But if it is like this, then you maybe put in 5 days of work, and then you will find out it's not possible. In that case, you can stop the project instead of putting 50 days of work into a project and find it out then. Yeah, so show the customer your prototype and discuss on this prototype. Some questions you should actually ask the customer when you talk to him. What do you want? I mean, really, what do you want? That's actually the first question I ask the customer. And when you are together with the customer, are we in a team? Do we hit the same target here? Or do I have to do it alone? There is a few customers out there which really think, okay, we do it agile, but I don't have to do anything to support you. You will do it somehow, but we can't. So you must be clear that this guy in front of you is actually thinking the same way. You think that he wants some solutions where he has to put some efforts into it. For you, it's good if you see if it's possible, if there is a legacy application that you can get into it, like an Excel application or Access application, to see the data, to get an inspiration what it was until now. And you have to ask him for some specialties. Every application is like 80% is some basic features you can easily provide, but the 20% is the hard stuff. And it's good when the end user maybe knows it and tells you about it before you start. Okay, let's go on. You know what the customer needs. Then I prefer you start up and build a prototype data model. Do not start with the application. Think about the data model first, because you know how the application should look like. So you have to know how the data model should look like too. But you, of course, can extend it later. I would advise you to import some real data. It makes the feeling for the customer more real. And he doesn't come to you and says, yeah, it looks similar to what I need, but actually this data is wrong. Yes, of course it is wrong, because I had to imagine some example data, because I have nothing else. And then you discuss on a way which is actually not important at all. So if he sees the real data, it's much easier for the end user to imagine the final product. Yeah, and then go on, build the application package, build a PL/SQL package, include the business logic, include some arrow logic. For me, it's always important. If something goes up, if something goes wrong inside the business logic, I need to know where, exactly the position, which statement is actually raised an error, with which parameters, and with which Oracle error message, so that I can easily fix it and see it. And when you have reports in your application and they become more complex, then put this logic inside a view. Okay, and there are still some things when you're new to Apex, or even if you're not, I would not advise that you should the following things, and that's most important, that people integrate JavaScript where it is not necessary. So think twice before you do that, or plugins. I had, when the plugins came out, there was some guys at the company who thought, hey, my Apex application, they need to have all available plugins inside so that I'm ready to fix every problem that could occur. But actually, I would never do that, because plugins get extended. They will maybe not work in the next version. So use them when it's not able to solve it with Apex itself, and integrate them in that moment, because you must be able to fix the plugin when something goes wrong. Most of the plugins are for free, so it's your responsibility. Business logic inside Apex, especially for young guys doing JavaScript, or for the guys who has no time to finish their application in a high quality. They put all the business logic into the application. Sooner or later, you get some problems. And then there's a view layer. I have seen and heard some guys propose to do so, that you split up the business logic and the application logic by creating some kind of view layer in between. And now I will come to my first example to make it more clearly what I actually meant. My first example is called View Nightmare. I had to create an Apex prototype. No, there was an Apex prototype, sorry. And I had to finish this prototype. And it was not such a big Apex application. It had 10 tables, 20 pages, but it had 60 views, which is a lot. The views, those of you which are know Apex, you have pages. Like if you have a master detail Apex application, you have a master. Like the report, it's a page, and you have the detail, it's a page, so you have 2 pages. And in Apex, there is a page 0. And the code you put in page 0 is executed in each page of your application, except you make it conditionally. So what they did was they created for each table a corresponding view for the application ID and the application page, and for page 0 it is the emp table and dep table. And each detail view, like on page 1 you have some select statement, they created an extra view and put all the logic into this extra view, also called app ID, page ID, and some description. And it went on like this. And of course, this view was based on those 0 views. And that is how they came up with 60 views. Yeah. I had a few problems to understand and accept this situation. First of all, you have mass code duplication, which is actually nothing you should, so as soon as you have to extend your application, you get real problems. And then you cannot use the standard Apex processes, like a master detail. Standard process won't work in a view which is capsuled after 3 times in 3 different layers. It will not work. So you have to build up your own processes. The maintainability decreases, and the costs and time during your development is increasing, and you lose your Apex feature, number 1, your speed. You actually lose it, and you don't win any security. Nothing, not at all. What did I do? I burned it. I erased it. Every view was gone. I dropped the whole application and started from the ground because it was too many views inside. I couldn't handle it. We done it. It was only 10 tables, 20 pages, so maybe 4 days, 5 days of work. And at the end, 10 views, because I also put my logic into the database. But when I talk about views, I have a view for the business logic, which is accessible for the packages and for my Apex application. It's important. I also add views called LOV. In Apex, you have a list of values which are accessing those LOV views. And when I use my package and I have to access the same data, I go on the same view. So you have one source which can easily be updated and edited. And of course, every page in Apex goes in the same list of value. Okay, and then I fixed the problem, fixed the application, and everything was all right. Second example, it's called JavaScript Performance Leak. In that case, the application was ready to give it out, but it didn't work. And I came to rescue. And at the time when I had to help the customer, I was first asked to check up the application and to propose what could be done better. And at the time when I did that, no interactive quit was available. And the customer needed actually an interactive quit, but with a lot of rows, 8,000 rows of data on one page at a time. And they even said, yeah, I proposed later that maybe we could change the application to interactive quit, but also interactive quit loads the data. Like when you scroll down, it reloads the data. It takes some time. And they didn't even like that. But you cannot put up a report with 8,000 rows in interactive quit. It will probably not work. So we are on 4.2 in that example, so we will have no interactive quit. But the task to solve was, we have this big report. Every cell, I mean, there was a few columns, and those columns should be edited. When I edit a cell, save the information towards the database. And if I do it, for example, on row 1, in row 10 was a dependency towards row 1, so I had to update row 10 as well as row 1. So this was one complexity. Then I had a context menu, some tree functionality inside the report, and some freeze header. Before I show the result, what I did, the first solution, and that's important for you to understand, the first company thought about how to fix that, because obviously Apex couldn't do it from their perspective, from out of standard features. So they came up with the idea, okay, there's a JavaScript library called EasyUI. And they analyzed it and meant this JavaScript library can do what we need. But after the development, a few problems occurred. The first problem, which is okay because it's this is how we do it, but every communication was done with JSON. And it is a problem because it was not an Apex standard process. It was like the JavaScript library only. And Apex was just a shell, and every update and select statement was sent by an Apex process. And Apex itself was not used anymore. So it's included a lot of JavaScript. So you have to be a JavaScript expert to maintain this application, and a lot of PL SQL, including all this JSON handling. And on top of this, because there was so much complexity in the application, there was no security implemented, no session state protection. You could easily change data right away. And the biggest problem was that the first load, or when you loaded the page, took 15 minutes before the page was ready to work with. And I had to solve this issue. And I said that I couldn't do it. I couldn't promise that I can do it because I can only try. So I said I will create a prototype with some example data, including 8,000 rows and including most of the functionality from a prototype perspective. And we will see if it works out. And I did that. And this is the actual prototype. I added some. Oh, you don't see. Okay, here we are. So this is the prototype. I just reloaded, otherwise it wouldn't be fair. I mean, I could have had loaded it 15 minutes before, just said, wow, I made something great. No. It takes some time to actually load 8,000 rows. I mean, most of the time is to send it towards my browser, and my browser had to create an HTML page out of it. And here it takes like 30 seconds. And what did we got was an application where we could edit some lines, you know, the cell. I could click out of it, and then a process starts. I just showed it with a pop-up. So this was, of course, not shown in the final application, but you see there's some ID, some value, also a hash value, which is created automatically. Then we should have, I have to reload it, a tree menu on this side. I don't know where it is. Just disappeared. There it is. I don't know what happens. And I had just to show that it's possible to navigate in the tree as well, so that I can hide data or show data. Okay, and then, I mean, I can tell you much. There's the free statter, and there are the 8,000 rows. So I proved to them it is possible, but of course, it's not the real standard Apex way to fix this. But the end user has seen some results for the end user. It was like, okay, it's easy to fix. But for me, of course, it's not so easy to build up this functionality inside Apex. So I had to add a lot of JavaScript, dynamic action logic to make this happening. I mean, I can't go to the customer and say afterwards, yeah, we did it like 90%, but now we can't do it anymore. So you have to live with some other solution you actually don't want. If you promise it once, you have to keep your promise, otherwise he will not trust you anymore. So what did we do? There is a custom event. So biggest problem when you have a lot of rows and you have some dynamic actions, especially if you have a lot of dynamic actions, you normally address them with a class or an ID. And this is done when the page is starting. But if you have to do it in this gigantic HTML file, your browser collapses. So instead of that, you have to call the functionality in the moment when you click on something. And this change input item is a custom event called change input, custom event based on JavaScript. And in that case, it just executes some JavaScript code to take the information into my HTML session, and then I could add some PL SQL code to put it into the database. And what did I do on the report side? I added the column population, and I added some HTML code, HTML expression to actually call the event handler. So instead of just showing the value of the population, I tell the application, please execute this event trigger change to input, including the ID, data ID, hash, and value. Yeah, and that's it. Include and show the population. So that's what happens. Okay, let's go on with our presentation. So at the final solution, we had around 40 dynamic actions. So it was not easy. It was really difficult, but there was just this way or the highway. So we made it. The third example is called Customer Goes Wild. You don't understand what they want. Actually, I understand quite fast what they want, or I thought I would have. They had a planning tool where they made a quarterly planning through the year on different levels, different departments, and they had like 14 Excel files which had to be migrated into one Apex application. And those 14 Excel files looked all the same. Just the base data, so the planning data which had to be put on each quarter was different from row to row and had to be manually created out of different, every Excel file had different sources, and there was one guy who had to bring those sources manually together and put them, copy paste into the Excel, into the target Excel file. So, and on top of that, we had different reporting levels. Of course, like the head saw something different, like the region. Yeah. So, what I did, or what we always did, in that way we stick to the APEX standard. It's important to keep it in mind. So this was the original file. Looked really similar. We had, so those were the rows, which actually including some data. And there was a guy fetching this data manually in the source, from the sources, and copy pasted into this file, like 100 rows, including a lot of risk that he makes some mistakes. And then they had another group of persons. They had to make a plan, had to say, okay, those 25 I do in Q1, I do in Q2, and they had to put in the actual values later. But this was one file. It was open for everyone, so everyone could change whatever they wanted to change. In the target, they wanted that the plan was be done in 2 weeks, and then nobody should go into the plan anymore. And this plan, this was not at all changeable. But in the Excel file, you can change whatever you want. It's Excel. So what we did, we used APEX 5.1 using the interactive grid and built it up something similar. You had some filter you had to define first, and then you got your interactive grid, where this data was calculated before, with no guy had to put something together. We took the original sources, transformed it, and put it into our interactive grid. And then we had those user groups with the rights for like area east, area north, and they could edit their data. They had to edit in the time they had to do it. So that's basically it. So from our perspective, we could automate the data preparation, save 30 days per year. We had data integrity. We had row-level security. We had read and write functionality on a column level. So we could say Q1 is over. Nobody is allowed to edit anything anymore in Q1. We had a better design, but still it looked similar to the original application because somebody who made it was thinking about it first, so we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. And even for the customer, it's easier to see something they had before. It's easier to work with it. Yeah, and we used only standard components like interactive grid or the Oracle jet charts to display every chart. The customer, they saw it from a different perspective. They meant they need something completely new, and they didn't want to have the old stuff they had before. We told them that we saved them time, made the data integrity and so on, but they didn't listen. It doesn't care. What they wanted was a dashboard, and they want to see all important data in this dashboard. And they wanted the editing, the planning of the data on some level inside the dashboard. So instead of the interactive grid, they wanted to swirl down to a certain level, and there they wanted to make the planning, which is actually insane. And they meant we should show them how to do that because they don't know, because we are the experts and we should be able to show what's happening in modern design. Okay, because we are only human and we are Apex developers solving problems people have so that they can work with the applications. I asked them about the dashboard, and that's really important. On which level does your end users make which decisions? So if you have normally a report with a lot of key values inside, and you create a dashboard instead, this dashboard can only focus on a certain amount of the information you had in the report before. So this information, I need to know about this. I need to know about these important key values. What are they? On what level? So what decision is made on what level? And they just said, look into the Excel. But they didn't want to have what's in the Excel. So we turned around a lot. So we made some examples with the Oracle Jet. We showed them the APEX example application. There are a lot of charts inside. But what they said, is that all what APEX can do? And we said, yes, those are the basic features. And we work with the basic features. And they meant, yeah, but we looked in the internet, I found a dashboard competition. A dashboard competition, what you made, Mr. Arnold. And they asked, why didn't you show us? So I made 2 years ago, or 1 year ago, a dashboard competition where we didn't have the Oracle Jet charts. We had only old Flash charts to show the world that we can have nice charting solutions, but all those were made out of a prototype development. It was proof of concept, what they provided. But it was good examples. But most of those examples were not important anymore 1 year later because we had a Jet charts. But I told them I could have shown those examples, but I said no to myself from my instinct. It says, okay, I can show them, then they like something. I have a lot of trouble to integrate, and we have the standard APEX functionality, which is easy to integrate. I don't show them. Makes no sense. We show them the standard. And I mean, there are a lot of risks integrating such proof of concept examples. And they just didn't understand and wanted to know why I didn't show them. So to let you understand what it means, we had one dashboard, including a plugin. Looks like that, including some key value and a bar chart and some sign if it's good or bad. But of course, and I knew that too, that's not what they wanted to have. What they wanted to have was more something like this. They wanted, of course, more information inside. And for me, this means I have to check the plugin if it's possible to extend this plugin in the way it is designed. And of course, it wasn't possible. This bar chart didn't have the functionality to add some data inside. I had to recreate the whole plugin. And I think I also proposed how much time it would take, like 5 days. And they wanted at the end something like this. I mean, different colors, different values, of course. But what's important for you, that standard APEX is not always what the end user wants. It's seldom, but it's sometimes they think they need something else. And it's on you to decide if you want to go that road or if you stop. But if you decide to go that road, it can be hard to take it. Okay, now let's go to the dashboard competition. I want to show a few more examples. And here, before I start, the dashboards, when you see them, and the customer, he saw, does it fit my requirement? Does it look good? That's what the customer sees when you show this to them. And what you see, or what you should consider when you look on those dashboards, you should see how complicated is it to integrate it, how much JavaScript is inside, and how is it integrated. And of course, your colleagues, will they understand? Maybe you are a JavaScript expert, but your colleagues, they are like forms experts. They have no clue about JavaScript. So you build something nice, and they will probably don't like what you have built it, to say it in a nice way. How is it with the security? Did the guy who built the dashboard thought about the security? And what frameworks, how many frameworks do you have to handle to build up the certain solution? So I will show you the dashboards. yeah. This is what we don't want. Okay, the first solution is made with standard APEX functionality mostly. So there's this bubble chart Carsten showed today. When you click on it, it's the regions in Germany. And if you click on it, you get some, I can maybe make it a bit bigger. It's nicer. If you click on it, he thought about a dashboard like this, that you compare two regions in different time, in different years, which each other. And the important point is, he chooses then the region, a year, and then you can just easily change it to another region in another year. And the really important stuff are those key values. So he chooses those are my key values. Your customer tells what the key values are. But the idea behind to compare those key values from a certain perspective is really a nice idea, which you could tell your customer to actually think about. So what did he do? He was using basically a few plugins and basic APEX functionalities, including the regions, the items, including no JavaScript code, and a few or dynamic actions where it was needed. I mean, you need, if you are interactive, you need dynamic actions. And if you do APEX and you do JavaScript, your JavaScript code should lay exactly somewhere in there, because those dynamic actions are made for all developers to see what happens, where it happens, so that everyone can easily check it out right on the position when it happens. If the naming is all right or not, that's always a matter. But there you see it. And if you have all your code, instead of here where you can see when it happens and what happens, if you have it in here as a file or as a lot of functions, you have no idea when it happens and where exactly. It's really hard to check it out. Okay, next example. It's the complete difference. I mean, at the dashboard competition, it was not the goal that it has to be standard APEX. There was no rule like this. But for me, it's good for you to tell what you can do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. So perfectly to describe. So this guy, he put it in a lot of efforts, and it was really complicated. And it was really complicated because what he did was like a type of interactive dashboard. So you can choose some countries, get some data in different charts, where he included another chart library. And then he could like change his set of data. So change it and add own chart types. So this is like energy consumption, and here it is like per inhabitant, and then you could add it like bar line chart and how big it is. So I will just add this one, save, and at the end I will have somewhere my chart. So I could build up my own charts. So it's a really nice idea, even though I am not so fan of it, because most of the end users, they don't want this. They don't want to build up their own stuff. They maybe think they want it, but actually they know what they want. They know what they make decisions out of. So that is what you need to know, to understand. And then you build the chart in the way they need it. And if they need 5 different perspectives, then you build up those 5 different perspectives. But probably this one, I don't know. I just heard it, and a lot of companies make a lot of money with these concepts, but I'm not, I don't think that, I mean, like 5% think this is good and 95% want their standard. There are few, daily few they want to look at and want to see. They don't want to change it every fifth minute. But that's just my opinion. Important is, what did he do when he made up this application? He was using a few dynamic actions, which is good. And he was using a few APEX items, reports. But what he was also doing was he added a lot of JavaScript libraries, which means a lot of maintainability. If you use different JavaScript libraries, they will maybe soon do not work in further APEX versions. And especially when you have different ones, then they will maybe not incorporate in future versions. So you have to think about all this stuff. And then you have the code itself, which is, I don't want to go deep into it, just want to show you around 1,000 lines of JavaScript code. And from my perspective, when somebody is checking out an example about dashboards, and it is only one page, then every APEX developer should be able to understand this solution in at least one day. And I bet maybe one or two will understand it, maybe in one day, but everyone else, I mean, even I wouldn't do it in one day. You need longer, and it makes no sense. Just for one page, it's insane. So the maintainability is really on the edge. So it's a prototype, which is okay. But this prototype is actually using APEX also only as a shell to communicate with the data. And it's not really properly integrated. And I don't want to talk about security, which is actually a big matter, especially when you do a dashboarding and you visualize important data. Okay, and the last example was the winner of the dashboard competition. And this winner created an example with a little bug. I just reload the page and then it shouldn't happen. He used an interactive report here on the left side. So probably every one of you knows interactive reports. This one doesn't look like one, but he used some clever CSS settings to make it look completely different. So he specialized on animal data. And you could change the data by clicking on different regions, different animals, different years. Yeah. So, and what he did, how he did it, he used all type of APEX functionality, like plugins, normal functionalities, regions, items, dynamic actions, and also JavaScript, but, and that's the difference to the other guy, it is as much JavaScript as you can actually take into yourself, understand, and do it in a way that you maybe use it as dynamic actions when you want to integrate it in your application. So this is something you could handle as an APEX developer. Okay, so I will go back to the presentation. A little summary. So what is standard APEX? That was the original question. For me, standard APEX means something that you should stick to the end user. You should use the standard APEX basic features like interactive grid, jet charts, form-on tables. For JavaScript, you should use dynamic actions. Then APEX, when you do APEX projects, APEX is made to be agile. It's the way you're fast. You can do immediately what the customer wants. You can discuss it with him or her. Then you should follow the logic SQL, PL SQL first. Then you should start always with a database model, and you should put your code, your business logic into packages. And you should always think that JavaScript is not APEX. You can use JavaScript. JavaScript is nothing bad, but you should use it in a way that you actually are able to maintain your application. And you should think twice before you use JavaScript, or if you can do it with standard APEX functionality. And yeah, do you have any questions?
When you try to leave a customer, when you feel that you can't deliver what they want,
Yeah.
I guess some customers will become upset, and maybe they will not even pay you for the work that you have done. You spend 2 weeks, and you of course need money for 2 weeks, and they say, well, you didn't deliver, so we don't want to pay you anything.
Yeah, but I'm honest with the customer. I'm normally paid from what I have done. I tell him in front or first, when I do a prototype, we have to throw it away because maybe I cannot do it, but let's find out. Otherwise, you will spend your 500,000 anyway. So let's try it with 5,000 first or whatever. And yeah, but then if I say yes, I do it, then I will deliver. That's of course important, especially as a freelancer. And I mostly deliver. They are just, I mean, those are extreme examples, but it's good that people understand what can happen. So like over 95%, I maybe had 3 projects where I came actually in this situation. And of course, it can happen that someone is really pissed at you, but then you don't talk about 100 days of work because of Apex. He will find out really soon. You will find out really soon that it doesn't work together. And then it can happen that he maybe stops paying you, but he could also go bankruptcy and stops paying you. Things like this can happen in the business. Yes, it can. But it actually doesn't happen really often. So these examples are really seldom use cases. I mean, from 100 projects, it's like 1 or 2 getting up like this, or 3. So it's still enough money I can make so that I don't have to lie under a bridge. Okay, I hope this answers the questions. Okay, more questions? Anyone? I hope, I mean, every one of you, standard Apex, everyone has his own perspective. This is just my perspective on it. And maybe it makes you think, maybe it doesn't. This is one way to be successful, but there are different ways, as always in IT. Okay, if nobody has any questions, thank you. And